And with the sandwich generation, here's the bottom line. No matter what age the woman listening is at this moment, we all pour into somebody. Whether you have kids, you don't have kids, you're an empty nester, you've got aging parents, we find someone to pour into, and we are exhausted, right?
Hi, I'm Glennis Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. One of the things that's interesting about midlife is that it's full of transitions, including the idea that once we get to midlife, that we're going to start questioning ourselves about what it is we want to do, how we want to do it, when we want to do it, or even if we want to do it. This is an interesting phenomenon because as soon as we start hitting midlife, things start changing in our bodies and our emotions, sometimes externally in our relationships, even our expectations. And sometimes we just need some help in making some decisions on how we make a decision and what kinds of things we keep take into consideration without putting us in a situation where we just don't ever make any decision and then life gets to be, quite frankly, unbearable. That is why I'm so excited to have with us Cynthia Bentzen, who has written a wonderful book. She is a board-certified executive coach, human capital strategist, and a best-selling author with more than 30 years of C-suite leadership experience. She is the creator of Stop Drifting, The Discipline of Direction. And today we're going to be talking about what that means, what the framework is around your ambitions, and how women who have an overextended identity, how they can kind of heal from that and still drift quietly to their goals and ambitions. Cynthia, welcome to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Oh my goodness, it's so good to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about this drift. I'm not even sure if I understand what it is. I think I do, but from your perspective, what does it mean to stop drifting?
Yeah, I think about drift as anytime you're moving away from alignment. And what happens is when my thought partner, Kimberly Rath, and I were doing research around our first book, Now Near Next, it was all about career. And one of the things we discovered when we studied women around the globe is that we're not very intentional in our career planning. We were taught to put your head down, work hard, and wait to get tapped. Since writing that book and publishing in 2024, I started to recognize that, you know what? We kind of drift in all parts of our life from time to time. We over index on taking care of everybody else. And I started to realize sometimes I'm drifting in my relationships. I'm not being as intentional in nurturing relationships. Sometimes I drift in my physical and mental health. Maybe I'm not working out or not eating right or not paying attention. And so that really led me to this notion of anytime we're moving without our own choosing, without discipline, toward out of alignment, that's drift. And it's hard as women sometimes to reel that back in, A, to realize we're drifting in the first place, and then B, to realize what are the consequences of that?
What are the signals? How do we know that we are drifting?
Yeah, it's an important question. So, one of the things I invite women in particular to do is I created 5 Ps because I just find it makes it a little easier to remember. But it's your people health, it's your physiological health, it's your sense of purpose. That could be spiritual, could be your true north. It's your prosperity. How are you doing financially? And your, what did I miss? Potential, your career, are you living into your gifts and talents? So I invite you to sit first and think about how am I feeling in those 5 dimensions of my human flourishing? And you use the exact word. What is the signal that I'm out of alignment? And here's what you and I probably both know. Our body tells on us first. So it's usually when you start to pause for a moment, you're like, I'm really worked up about my finances, or I'm really worked up because I feel out of relationship with my friends or my partner or my spouse. You notice it in your body first. I can't sleep. I want to sleep all the time. I've got this chronic headache. I feel achy. I am exhausted, right? What are the signals? And then the next thing is, what are the patterns? Is it all the time? Is it some of the time? Is it every Sunday I get the blues before I have to go to work to the job I dread? Is every time my partner walks in the door, I want to wring his or her neck, right? You start to recognize the patterns. That's the very first step.
It sounds like you've had some experience with this. Otherwise, you would not have written the book, I would imagine. What were your signs? What happened to you that made you realize that you were in the drift?
Oh, that's a very personal and important question. So when we were writing Now Near Next, one of the things that we kept finding is that women weren't intentional in their careers. And I, if I'm being completely honest, couldn't relate to that as much. I was like, gosh, I feel like I've been the exception. I was always pretty planful about my career, identifying what I wanted to next and working on academics. But as I was sitting in the last 3 years of entrepreneurship, out of corporate, solopreneur, spend a lot of time alone. I live in a community that is pretty touristy, so it's very quiet in the fall and the winter. I started to have this realization that I have not been as intentional about nurturing the relationships around me. I'd been on a dating sabbatical for 3 years, not on purpose. And my mom would say, "You don't meet people sitting in your home office 24/7. That's not, the men are not going to be knocking on the door." But even with my friendships, it got really easy to just, no, I'm good, stay at home. And so for me, that was the first awakening is I have to be more intentional about my relationships because that's reciprocal. People stop calling if you never say yes to the invitation. But then it got me, we're all very good at being Monday morning quarterback, right? So then it got me thinking about my past. And I started to think about my marriage to my kid's dad, wonderful man. We were married for 20 years. It was not a good fit. Probably the first 5 years were really great. And I was drifting the next 15 because I was avoiding making a difficult decision. So we drift in one of three ways typically. We drift through complacency, right? We're just going through the motions and we just don't look up and it's just happening and we don't realize it till suddenly maybe we look up and we're like, I'm in the same damn job that I've been in for 10 years that is not very fulfilling. And I've lost 10 years of my life. Sometimes it's incremental because we're dismissive. A bad thing happens and we address it, and then we assume it's a one time occurrence and we move on, and then something else happens. It's putting your pants on and they're a little tight. And you're like, oh, I ate quite a bit over the weekend. And then 3 weeks later, you put something else on and it's even tighter. And you're like, I'm a little bloated. And then 2 months later, you look at the scale and you're like, oh my word, I've gained 8 pounds, right? That's incremental. And then there's avoidant drift, which is I see there's an issue in my job, in my relationship, in my finances, in my health, but I just don't want to deal with it. So I'm going to throw all my energy over here. I'm just going to avoid it.
That's interesting because I'm sure so many women can relate to that. And the average age of the person who listens to this podcast is between the ages of 45 and 55. Really good, what I would call ripe drift potential.
Yeah.
And I think many women recognize the fact that they probably are in alignment, but it's all about getting the motivation or the inspiration to do something about it. So, what do you advise to get people on that ability to basically, for lack of a better description, to pivot and to
Yes.
begin to get back in alignment?
Yeah, I love that you use the word pivot. So I have a simple practice called the 7 minute pivot. The resources are available for free on my website. So it's there for the taking. Essentially, what the 7 minute pivot suggests is that every day that you take 7 minutes. And what I love about 7 minutes is psychologically, it really starts to engage that frontal lobe, that reasoning part of our brain. Because normally our brain says, even if the change might be better for us, change is scary and risky, and my job is to protect you, so I'm going to keep you from doing it. 7 minutes is long enough to engage that frontal part of our brain that says, let's lock into some reasoning. It's more than 5, it's less than 10. And in that 7 minutes, you remove all distractions. You take out a pen and paper and you ask yourself these 3 questions. First, of the 5 dimensions of human flourishing, where do I feel off? What doesn't feel good to me today? Second, what are the signals? What is my body telling me? Is it anxious? Is it worry? Is it I didn't sleep well? What is it? And then is there a pattern? Is this brand new? Is it just today? Or has this been going on for a while? But where the magic happens is you pick one small thing to do that day. And here's what I think is so important to your point. We think that it has to be a life overhaul, right? We think that if our marriage is in trouble or our finances are in trouble or we don't like our job or we have a toxic boss, whatever it is, it's so overwhelming to think about, oh my gosh, I have to get a divorce or oh my gosh, I have to quit my job. That's big. The one small thing might be I'm going to commit to journaling all the things that are bothering me about my relationship, or I'm going to initiate a conversation with my partner, or I'm going to update my resume. One tiny thing that you can commit to and tick that box. And here's the reality when you show up every single day and make that decision to do one small thing, think about 365 days of that. I did the math at one point. It's 2,555 minutes of introspection and action. A
Yes,
pivot that small takes you in a whole different direction.
that's amazing. And people don't think of that. We have a tendency to think of making changes in big transitions, big steps. And if it's not large enough, then we haven't really done a lot. But this is it's small, incremental. And I can talk with my clients a lot about procrastination when it comes to implementing their wellness goals. And what we try to go is for a small, incremental change.
Yeah.
That's where habits come from, quite frankly, as you mentioned earlier. But also, when you have that small change and you achieve it, and you do that on a daily basis, there's a little bit of dopamine that kicks in. Yes, this feels good. And you find yourself wanting to do it more and maybe incorporate one more thing. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
100%. What the work that you do is so directly aligned to the dimension around the health portion of it. And that's the thing. And so I'll even have people say to me, I'll say, what's your one small thing? And they'll say, I'm going to work out 3 days this week. I'm like, that's not a small
That's
thing.
a big thing.
That's a big thing.
Sounds
If you're not working out, that's a big thing. What's your one small thing? Your one small thing might be that you're going to find 15 minutes to go on a walk today, or you're just going to work out today. And then tomorrow, your one small thing can be what you're going to do tomorrow. But we overwhelm ourselves. And to your point, I think then we're disappointed, right? Because we don't live up to this massive overhaul. So then what do? Avoidance.
Yes, that's very true. And I know that there are things that people get wrong during this whole process, and you have a lot more experience with this piece since it's your process. What are some of the things that people backslide on or misunderstand as they're going through this process?
Ooh, I love that. A couple of things. So, what it isn't, and I'm a fan of these things, but what it isn't, it's not meditation, it's not prayer, it's not your daily spiritual reflection. Those are all amazing and they can also happen. What's so important, and it's not a to-do list. I think the biggest thing that people confuse is either that they're just manifesting, putting it out into the world. Big fan of manifestation, by the way. I think it augments lovely. The difference is this is not a to-do list, and what it is taking the one small action. And so the minute you make it too big, or the minute you don't come up with that small concrete action that you're going to take, it loses its power because it gets back to your dopamine, right? It gets back to that. I did that little thing today. I can tick that box. I can highlight. I had somebody a long time ago used to scratch things out when I finished something on my to-do list. And they said, I highlight it instead of scratch it out because then I can see the thing I did. So I think that's the biggest thing is taking on too much or missing the whole point of this taking on an action.
We will return to our conversation with Dr. Cynthia right after this message from our sponsors. If you're curious about supporting your metabolism naturally, check out Aura Organics GLP-1 Up. It's a plant-based supplement formulated with 4 clinically studied botanical ingredients that help support your body's natural GLP-1 production. It helps with your healthy blood sugar response, appetite regulation, and energy balance. Plus, it's third-party tested, non-GMO, and made with clean ingredients you can trust. Learn more by using my affiliate link in the show notes and take one more step towards feeling your very best. Just a quick note, the link in today's show notes is an affiliate link, which means I may earn a small commission if you decide to purchase at no additional cost to you.
What about the person, especially women these days at this particular age, between 45 and 55? They're playing so many roles, they're doing so many things. And on top of that, their body is changing. I remember way back when I was in my 40s, 50s, and all that, there was definitely a period of time where I felt severely burned out. But when you're feeling burnt out, how can the same kind of process work?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, and I'm right on the tail end of the age bracket that you mentioned, so I get it. And with the sandwich generation, here's the bottom line. No matter what age the woman listening is at this moment, we all pour into somebody. Whether you have kids, you don't have kids, you're an empty nester, you've got aging parents, we find someone to pour into, and we are exhausted, right? Most of the time. I think that's really the beauty of the 7 minutes, number one. And number two, it starts with this unapologetic, guilt-free investment in you. You are not going to move out of exhaustion and all of those things if you don't pour back into your own cup. And we know that logically. It's will love to tell us can't pour from an empty vessel. But here's the thing. Wake up 7 minutes earlier, find 7 minutes before you go to bed. I prefer it at the beginning of the day because it sets my intention on my course for the day. You deserve You have permission to find 7 minutes to just be introspective, to take time to really be intentional. And quite frankly, you'll be a better mom, daughter, coworker, auntie, whatever it is for it, because we have to pour back into ourselves. And so finding the time initially, it's like anything, I'm sure with the clients that you work with, right? It's getting started is the hardest part. I say to people, take the Stop Drifting Diagnostic Survey. It's free on my website. Within 6 minutes, it helps you identify where you're drifting. You probably already know, but it validates it. And download the 7 Minute Pivot Practice Guide, which walks you through what I just mentioned earlier. And then give yourself 21 days, just 7 minutes every morning. Wake up a little earlier. I like to put on some spa music or meditation music, something that sort of fills the space just to be alone with your thoughts. Turn off all the bells and whistles, right? I actually encourage people to set a timer. And here's why. For folks that like to live in the mess of it all, they can wallow there, right? And then there's probably the majority of women listening that are more like you and I, where we don't even want to deal with it. We don't want to deal with the mess. We just want to get on with the day.
Yeah.
So for those of us that would rather shove it under the rug, it forces us for 7 minutes to just sit with ourselves and then choose that one small thing. And I promise you, you do that enough, couple of 3, 4, 5 days in a row, get that into a habit, and it becomes something you look forward to. It's your me time. Protect it. It's unapologetic, guilt-free time to invest in yourself.
I love it. Now, I know on the show page, we're going to have a link for people to take that survey. And I encourage all of you to take that survey. What are some of the success stories you've had with clients that have used this method?
Yeah. So I was working with a woman. She was in a job that she was really unhappy in, and she was going to work every day with literally a stomach ache. It would start on Sunday as she was thinking about Monday. And then every day as she commuted about 30 minutes to work, she would just have this anxious and intestinal sort of disruption. And when she started doing the 7 minute pivot, and I have one of her quotes, one of her testimonials, she talked about it started to free the way she was thinking about it, number one, because the intentional baby steps that she was taking were positioning her for her next. She had identified that she was what kind of job she wanted next, when date certain that she wanted that to happen. And she started making just one decision every day that pivoted her toward that future role, which, by the way, she's in now, I'm proud to say. But as important as it is that she's in the new role, which I love, and ultimately that's the big win, I think one of the biggest wins is when she was still in the job and she said, I don't go to work every day with a stomach ache. I can control what I can control. I'm liberated because I've created a path to my next. And that makes every day, I'm not stuck here. I'm not held hostage here. I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing to do good work and get this paycheck while I'm being intentional about
Are
where
you
I'm
being
going to go.
intentional? Yes, I know someone who just totally hates her job,
Hmm.
and she's so stressed out about the job that it feels like she doesn't have the time to look for a job. She's just overwhelmed and just feeling and beating up on herself because she knows she doesn't like her job, but she hasn't done anything to change that situation. The pivot sounds like something that she might benefit from. So I would tell her to go to your website, to fill out the questionnaire, and then see what's lacking or what needs work, and then to follow the steps in terms of making the pivot. And one of the steps is the 7 minute thing. Now, during the 7 minutes, is there a question that we ask ourselves during that 7 minutes in particular to start the process going in terms of how we should be thinking?
The first step is I outline the 5 Ps. So in the guide, it talks about your people, your prosperity, et cetera. And the question is really, where do I feel misaligned? Now, the diagnostic survey is going to tell you that. And I'll be honest with you, I tend to be a type of person that over indexes whatever I'm doing, I do in a big way, right? So if I'm focusing on my career and my business, I'm all in. And my relationships might be suffering a little bit, or I might not be getting my workout in, or I might be having more wine and less healthy food, right? And then there's times I thought, oh, I'm going to start dating. I'm going to put myself out there. That became so consuming. And then there was a point I thought, gosh, I feel behind at work. So I'm a person like that. I find refreshing the diagnostic survey on somewhat regularity once a month to say, think of it this way. Here's the metaphor that I think is helps me in my mind. If you think of a balance board, a board that's like on a ball, right? It's a balance board and you're standing on it. Keeping that complete balance is really hard. You're usually tipping and leaning and trying to keep all yourself. That's what life is for all of us. There's times where we're leaning in more because we have aging parents that need more of our time and energy and our career is taking a little back burner or we're raising children or whatever. There's times where work is perfect, so demanding. That's life. The question is not letting it tilt so far that you no longer are in control, that gravity, that the headwinds, that everything else is taking control of where you're going to end up because you're not being disciplined about how you're investing your time and energy. And so I think it's that balance board concept.
And that's so important. I think we've always heard this analogy before about when you're on the airplane and something happens to the oxygen, make sure you put the oxygen on yourself first before the person. And I think theoretically we know what that is supposed to be about, but in our lives it seems so hard because of the guilt thing that we take ourselves through because we didn't take care of the other person in need before we took care of our own needs. But I can attest because I have 4 daughters and 7 grandchildren. In order for me to stay engaged with my 4 daughters, and they're all in their late 30s and early 40s, and to stay engaged with my very young grandchildren because they wait late to have children, I have to make sure that I take care of myself. And sometimes taking care of myself means saying no or
That's right.
not right now. You know, that old saying that no is a complete sentence. And part of, I think, the stress sometimes of saying no for women is that they know the next question is going to be why. And you know what? I don't have to answer that question. And I don't have to be so archaic as to say, because I said so. I'm just, no, it's just no. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable talking about it right now. It's just no. And some people might be a little bit offended, but over time, when you use that complete sentence that way, they begin to respect the boundaries that you're setting. Because sometimes the out of alignment has to do with our lack of boundaries because we're just open for business for everybody.
1,000%. We have our open sign on constantly. So in Now Near Next, which is for mid-career women, the first chapter talks about boundaries. Because here's what we found when we said, gosh, you need to be more intentional. What did women say? Great. How am I supposed to have time for that? So the very first chapter before we could talk about anything else is give yourself grace, right? And how do you give yourself grace? You give yourself grace through boundaries. And boundaries are, to your point, saying no. We tend to, as women, I think of it in a matrix. We tend to, as women, think that everything has external value. It's important to the world outside. And because of that, it has to be important to us. And the reality is, there's things that might be important to your children or your significant other or your church or your community or your job that maybe don't have high value to you. And maybe those are things that can be delegated. Maybe those are things that could be you pen a check, you find another way, or you simply say no. I use an example. When my kids were little, I volunteered in my son's classroom one time thinking that was going to be so neat because I never got to volunteer when my daughter was little and my career was finally at a different place. And I was like, oh, all the other moms get to do that. All the stay-at-home moms get to do that. And I want to do that. And I did. And it was horrible. The kids sat on their pencils. They were snotty and gluey and all the things that I didn't. There was nothing about it that was fulfilling to me. And I was like, you know what? From now on, I'm going to buy them Kleenex because clearly they need it, and tissues and things for the classroom because that's not my gift. That is not
That's
where I need
such
to
a
spend
good
my time.
point. That's such a good point for everyone out there to hear, especially if you have little ones in your life and you want to participate. But you can choose how you want to participate and then take that in a much more global level. That's true for every single thing that you're involved in. Participate maybe by showing up in person, those things that you're most passionate about. And maybe you support in other ways, those things that either you're less passionate about or you just don't enjoy. It's part of your responsibility. That is such a good point. Now, I want you to tell everybody about your 2 books. I know you have 2 books. Tell us about those books and where they can find them.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. Now Near Next, which is a guide for mid-career women to move from serendipity to intentional advancement. And I would say this, regardless of the listener's age, I have found women who are nearing their encore to find a lot of relevance. And I've had young women. So if you have daughters, nieces, et cetera, that are early in career, it's anyone who, from a professional perspective, I think will get something out of it. It's about intentionality. And the through line is really start investing in your future today. Don't kick the can down the road, wait for the kids to go to school, the significant other to get their perfect job. Start working on your future today. And nobody else is looking out for you for that. The second book, Human Capital Investment Strategy, was really my attempt to say, look, we've discovered all this information about women and how they need to be more intentional. And by the way, it was 4 countries, 5 race ethnicities, a 25-year age span, global research. And that was the universal thing we all have in common was this lack of intentionality. I thought, and I say this very respectfully, I need a book that's written for the middle-aged white male who is writing most of the checks in corporate America.
Yeah.
What it does is it's more of an organizational book for leaders, for entrepreneurs, for C-suite executives, et cetera, that takes a look at through a financial framework because
Which
it's
is
the language of business,
language that
right?
they understand. Yes.
Something they understand from a human capital perspective. And it really talks about how talent comes in all shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds, faith traditions, et cetera. Talent is non-discriminatory. And so therefore, how do we strip away all of these arbitrary criteria that we think creates the perfect candidate and start to look at those natural God-given gifts and talents as what is core and predictive and can really help from a validated perspective identify future performance and gives them a framework.
It's so important. And it takes the guesswork out of it. And it also takes out any biases as well when they begin to take it from that approach. That sounds wonderful. And for those of you who are interested in either one of those books, you can go to Cynthia's website. We have a direct link to her website, to her social media, and also to your podcast, Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I love that title. That's fantastic. Cynthia, thank you so much for being on the V.I.B.E Living Podcast today. It's been wonderful having you. And thank you also for the light that you're putting into the world for women. It's so important.
Thank you so much for having me. You are such a gift, and I love the work that you're doing. It's really a privilege to be here.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for listening. It's been wonderful having Cynthia here. And I encourage you to go ahead and read the show notes and also click on those links. Don't forget to patronize our sponsors, to share and subscribe to the podcast as well. It's been wonderful having you. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget the vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.